What if everything you have ever chased, the money, the approval, the perfect circumstances, the better tomorrow, what if none of it was everything that could make you free? What if there's a place inside you right now, today, that cannot be touched by loss, cannot be shaken by insult, cannot be aged by time or frightened by death? And what if you have simply forgotten it is there? There's a small, quiet book written over 100 years ago that makes one of the boldest claims you will ever hear. It says that heaven is not a place you go to after you die. It says heaven is not a reward you earn through suffering. It says heaven is a state of the heart, available to you the moment you stop looking for it outside yourself. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you may never look at your own mind the same way again. Before we begin, let me tell you a little about the man who wrote these words. His name was James Allen, and if you have ever read the words "as a man thinks, so is he," then you already know his voice, even if you did not know his name. Allen was a quiet Englishman, born in the middle of the 19th century, who spent much of his working life in commerce before something in him shifted, a hunger for a deeper kind of truth than what business and ambition could offer. He left that life behind. He moved to a small cottage in the English countryside with his wife, and there, in simplicity and stillness, he wrote. He wrote about the mind. He wrote about character. He wrote about the astonishing, almost frightening power each of us holds over our own inner world. Allen was not interested in clever theories. He was interested in one thing only: the direct, lived experience of peace. He believed with total conviction that every human being carries within him a divine center, untouched by circumstance, and that the entire work of a meaningful life is to find that center and live from it. The book we are exploring today is called The Heavenly Life. It is short in pages but enormous in scope. In it, Allen does not ask you to wait for some future paradise. He asks you to consider that the kingdom you long for might already be within reach, hidden not because it is far away, but because it is so close you have stopped noticing it. So let's begin the way Allen begins, at the very center of things. Chapter 1, The Divine Center. Allen opens with a claim that sounds almost too simple to be profound, and yet it changes everything if you actually let it sink in. He says that the seeker of full and abundant life, a life with real strength in it, real happiness, real unbroken peace, is to find what he calls a divine center within yourself, and then, having found it, to live from that center rather than from the noisy outer edges of your existence, the cravings, the complaints, the endless mental arguments that make up so much of what we call being human. Think about how much of your day is spent out there, on that noisy edge. The worry about what someone said, the craving for something you do not have, the argument you are replaying in your head for the 5th time. Allen calls these things husks, just husks, the outer shell around the real kernel of life. And he says that anyone who wants to reach the true heart of existence has to be willing to let those husks fall away. Here is where he gets bold. He says that if you do not know the part of yourself that is unchanging, the part that death cannot touch and time cannot erase, then you do not really know anything at all. You are simply playing with reflections in a mirror, mistaking the flickering images of the moment for something solid and real. And if you never find within yourself those deep, calm principles that are not rattled by the arguments and vanities of the world, Allen says you'll find nothing but illusions, beautiful for a moment, then gone the instant you try to hold them. But here is the promise buried inside that warning. Allen says that anyone who firmly decides they will no longer be satisfied with appearances, with shadows, with illusions, anyone who makes that resolve with real conviction will, by the very light of that decision, Watch every fleeting fantasy dissolve. That person will step into the substance of life itself. They will learn how to truly live. And once they have found that center, they become the slave of no passion, the servant of no opinion, the follower of no comforting lie. They become, in Allen's words, pure and calm and strong and wise. And they begin, almost without effort, to radiate the very heavenly life they had discovered. Because that life is not separate from who they are. It is themselves. Now here is something remarkable Allen says about a person who has truly taken refuge in this inner center. He says such a person becomes free from sin, not because they have never made mistakes, but because they no longer live chained to the past. Their yesterdays become like sand that the tide has already washed smooth. No old failure rises up to torment them. No fire of regret can scorch someone who has stopped feeding that fire. Their tomorrows, meanwhile, become like seeds, quietly waiting to grow into something beautiful, and no fear of uncertainty is allowed to shake their trust. All they truly have, Allen says, is the present. Only in the immortal present do they actually live. He compares it to the eternal blue sky, looking down calmly, radiant with light, over the tear-stained faces of every generation that has ever lived and struggled beneath it. Then Allen turns his attention to why people suffer in the first place. He says men and women love their desires because satisfying them feels sweet in the moment. But the end of that road is always pain and emptiness. People love to argue, to defend their opinions, because feeding the ego feels good. But the fruit of that is always humiliation and sorrow sooner or later. It is only when a soul has finally reached the end of chasing pleasure and has tasted the bitter harvest of pride that it becomes ready to receive real wisdom and step into what Allen calls a divine life. Only the part of us that is willing to be, in his words, crucified, willing to let the small self die, can be transformed and rise again into something greater. He asks a piercing question here. He says, "You have your trials, don't you? But consider this. Every outward trial you face is really just a reflection of some imperfection still living inside you. Once you understand that, you become wise because you can transmute even your hardest trials into active joy. You find a kingdom where trials simply cannot reach you anymore." Then, almost tenderly, he asks, "When will you learn your lessons? All your sorrows," he says, "are quietly accusing you. Every pain is a fair witness against the unworthy, self-seeking part of you that clings to old patterns. And yet the kingdom of heaven is already yours. How long will you keep rejecting it, preferring instead the murky, uncomfortable atmosphere of your own self-made hell, where the small self is absent?" Allen says, that is where the garden of the heavenly life springs up. He describes it with the language of ancient poetry. Healing streams that quench every thirst, immortal flowers lining the path with joy, the sweetest hours rushing swiftly by. And then he gives us one of the most striking lines in the whole book. The redeemed, the ones who have been glorified in body and spirit, have been bought with a price. And that price is not money. It is not sacrifice of some external thing. The price is the crucifixion of personality itself. The death of the small, grasping, self-seeking self. And once that price has been paid, once that source of inner discord has been put away, a person discovers what Allen calls a universal music, the abiding joy that was always there underneath all the noise. He goes further still. Life, he says, is more than motion, it is music. More than rest, it is peace. More than work, It is duty more than labor. It is love more than enjoyment. It is blessedness and more than the accumulation of money, position, and reputation. It is knowledge. It is purpose. It is a strong and high resolve. Alan believes deeply that we are not victims of circumstance. He says, let the impure turn toward purity, and they shall become purer. Let the weak turn toward strength, and they shall become strong. Let the ignorant fly toward knowledge, and they shall become wise. Everything belongs to us, and we are the ones who choose what we will have. Today, most people choose in ignorance, but tomorrow, Alan insists we can choose in wisdom. Each of us must work out our own salvation, whether we believe that or not, because none of us can escape ourselves, and none of us can hand off the eternal responsibility of our own soul to somebody else. No clever excuse, no comforting theology will trick the law of our own being. That law will eventually shatter every selfish shortcut we try to build. And Alan makes it clear, God will not do for you what your own soul is meant to accomplish for itself. He offers a simple picture to make this land. Imagine a man who wants a peaceful home to live in. He buys the land and then simply kneels down and asks God to build a house for him without lifting a single brick himself. Wouldn't you call that man foolish? Now imagine another man who, having bought his land, actually goes and hires the builders, the carpenters, the architects, and gets the work moving. Wouldn't you call him wise? It is exactly the same, Alan says, with the building of a spiritual life. Brick by brick, pure thought stacked upon pure thought, good deed built upon good deed. That is how the house of a blameless life rises, slowly, from its foundation, until it finally stands complete in all its quiet majesty, not through luck, not through some special gift, not through favoritism, but through diligence, watchfulness, energy, and honest effort. The chapter closes with this thought, and it is worth sitting with. The spiritual heart inside each of us is, in some mysterious way, the very heart of the universe itself. And in finding that heart, a person finds the strength to accomplish anything worth accomplishing. They find the wisdom to see things exactly as they are without distortion. They find a peace that is genuinely divine. At the very center of a human being, Alan says, there lives the same music that orders the movement of the stars, the eternal harmony. Whoever wants to find true blessedness must first find themselves. They must be willing to let go of every discordant desire, every clashing thought, every unlovely habit. And in doing so, they will uncover the grace, the beauty, and the harmony that has been the true, indestructible essence of their own being all along. Chapter 2, The Eternal Now. If Chapter 1 asks you to find your center, Chapter 2 asks you a harder question. Where exactly are you living right now? Are you living in this moment? Or are you living in a memory or a fantasy of some future that hasn't happened yet? Alan opens with a striking idea. He says the true reality is not time. It is now. Now contains time, not the other way around. Now is bigger than time, more solid than time. It is ever present. It has no past and no future woven into it. It is eternally full of power and substance. Every minute, every day, every year becomes nothing more than a dream the instant has passed. It survives only as a faded, imperfect picture in memory. If it survives at all, past and future, Alan insists, are dreams. Now is the only reality. All power exists now. All possibility exists now. All meaningful action happens now. To fail to act now is, in a real sense, to fail to act at all, living in thoughts about what you might have done, or dreaming about what you intend to do someday. This, Alan says plainly, is folly, but putting away regret, releasing anxious anticipation about the future, and simply doing the work in front of you right now. That is wisdom, while a person is dwelling on the past or the future. Alan says, they are missing the present. They are forgetting how to live now. Everything that is possible now and only now, without wisdom to guide him, mistaking the unreal for the real. A person says things like, if only I had done such and such last week, last month, last year, things would be better for me today. Or they say, I know exactly what I should do, and I will do it tomorrow. The self-absorbed mind, Alan argues, simply cannot grasp the enormous value of the present moment. It fails to see the present as the one solid reality, while past and future are merely its hollow reflections. In truth, he says, the past and the future barely exist at all, except as shadows. To live inside them, replaying regret or spinning anxious plans, is to completely miss the reality of your own life. He offers a beautiful old verse here about how the present is the only thing we truly possess, and how, like the angel in the story of the patriarch, we must hold on to it firmly until it gives us its blessing. All that is real now remains and never fades. The verse says, while the hand that upholds the present also sustains the soul forever. So why? It asks, do you keep questioning what is yet to come or what has already passed? The past and the future to come are really one and the same thing, and both of them are simply now. People carry enormous power right now, Alan says, but because they do not realize it, they keep postponing their own greatness. They say, I will become perfect next year, or in so many years, or perhaps in some future lifetime. But those who truly live inside the kingdom, who live only in the present, say instead, I am perfect now. And by abstaining from wrongdoing right now, by constantly guarding the doorway of their own minds, never glancing backward with regret or forward with anxiety, they remain eternally whole and at peace. Now, Alan reminds us, echoing an old scripture, is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation. He gives us words to actually speak to ourselves. Say to yourself, I will live in my ideal now. I will express my ideal now. I will be my ideal now. And whatever tries to pull me away from that ideal, I simply will not listen to it. I will listen only to the voice of my own highest vision. By resolving this, and by actually living it out, Alan promises you will never fall away from the highest good, and you will continually express what is true. There's a beautiful passage he quotes about walking a road afoot and lighthearted, no longer whimpering, no longer postponing, needing nothing, done complaining indoors, done with querulous criticism, simply strong and content, walking forward on the open road. Alan urges us to stop wandering down every side path of dependence, every winding trail that tempts our soul into shadowland of the past and the future, and instead to express our native divine strength right now. Step out, he says, onto that open road. Whatever you would like to become, whatever you hope to be someday, Alan insists you can actually be right now. The failure to accomplish anything lives entirely inside your habit of perpetual postponement. And here's an encouraging twist. If you have the power to keep postponing something, that very same power proves you also have the power to accomplish it. Realize this truth, Alan says, and you will become, today and every day, the ideal person you have only ever dreamed of being. He draws a fine distinction between virtue and holiness. Virtue, he says, is the daily fight against sin, wrestling with temptation over and over. But holiness is something different. It is leaving sin ignored, unnoticed, allowed to simply wither and die by the side of the road. No longer worth your attention. And this, Alan says, can only happen when you are truly living in the now. Do not say to your soul, you will be purer tomorrow. Say instead, you will be pure right now. Tomorrow, he warns, is too late for absolutely everything. And anyone who places their hope of salvation in tomorrow will keep failing and falling today. Did you stumble yesterday? Did you sin in some serious way? Once you have recognized that, Alan says, leave it instantly and leave it forever and simply watch that you do not repeat it now. Because while you are busy grieving over the past, every gate of your soul stands unguarded, wide open for the very same failure to walk right back in. You will not rise, Alan tells us, by mourning over an irremediable past. You will rise only by mending the present. The foolish person, he says, loves the muddy side path of procrastination more than the firm, solid highway of present effort. That person says, I will rise early tomorrow. I will get out of debt tomorrow. I will finally follow through on my intentions tomorrow. But the wise person, understanding the enormous importance of the eternal now, rises early today, stays out of debt today, follows through on their intentions today, and in doing so, never once departs from strength, peace, and real accomplishment. Whatever is done now, Alan says, remains. Whatever is meant to be done tomorrow simply does not exist yet. It is wisdom to leave alone what has not yet arrived, and instead give your full attention to what is actually here. Doing so with such complete focus and devotion of soul that there is no possible opening left for regret to creep back in. Toward the close of the chapter, Alan tackles something even bigger, our fear of birth and death themselves. He says that because a person's spiritual understanding is often clouded by illusions about the self, they say things like, I was born on such and such a day, so many years ago, and I will die at my allotted time. But he asks, how can something immortal, something that eternally is, ever truly be subject to birth and death? Let a person shed these illusions, he says, and they will come to see that the birth and death of the physical body are simply incidents along a much longer journey, not its true beginning and not its true end. When we keep looking backward toward happy beginnings and forward toward mournful endings, our eyes become blind to our own immortality. Our ears close so that we can no longer hear the ever-present harmonies of joy that surround us. And our hearts harden so that they stop beating in rhythm with the deep, steady sounds of peace. The whole universe, with everything it contains, Alan concludes, exists now. Put out your hand and receive the fruits of wisdom. Stop your greedy striving, your selfish sorrowing, your foolish regretting, and simply be content to live. Act now, and everything we're doing is done. Live now, and you will find yourself standing in the midst of abundance. Simply be right now, and know that in this very moment, you are already whole. Chapter 3, The Original Simplicity. Now we come to one of the most poetic chapters in the whole book, and it opens with 4 short, plain declarations that carry an enormous weight. Life is simple. Being is simple. The universe is simple. Complexity, Alan tells us, only arises out of ignorance and self-delusion. He borrows a phrase from the ancient Chinese sage Lao Tzu, the idea of original simplicity, to describe the universe as it truly is. stripped of all our projections onto it, rather than the tangled, mysterious thing it appears to be when we look at it through the fog of our own illusions. Alan says that when a person looks at the world through that woven web of self-created confusion, they see endless complications and unfathomable mysteries everywhere. And in doing so, they get lost in a maze that they themselves built. But let a person put aside their own ego, Alan says, and they will see the universe in all the beauty of its original simplicity. Let them dissolve the illusion of the separate, personal I, and every illusion that springs from that sense of I will dissolve along with it. In doing this, a person becomes, in Alan's words, like a little child again. They revert back to that original simplicity. When someone succeeds in fully forgetting, or in a sense annihilating, their small personal self, they become like a mirror, faultlessly reflecting the universal reality. They wake up, and from that point forward, they stop living inside dreams and start living inside what is actually real. Alan brings in the ancient philosopher Pythagoras, who saw the entire universe expressed through the numbers 1 through 10. But Alan pushes this even further, saying that the simplicity can be reduced even more, all the way down to the number 1, because every number and every complicated combination those numbers can form is really nothing more than the number 1, added to itself again and again. Let life, Alan urges, stop being lived as scattered fragments and instead be lived as a single perfect whole. Do that, and the simplicity of the perfect will reveal itself to you. How, he asks, could a fragment ever hope to understand the whole? And yet how obvious it is that the whole can easily understand the fragment. How could sin ever perceive holiness? Yet how plainly holiness can understand sin? Whoever wants to grow into something greater must be willing to let go of the lesser thing they currently cling to. No single shape can contain the circle, Alan says, but the circle contains every shape within it. No single color can imprison the full radiance of light, but that light contains every color inside itself. Let a person tear down all the false forms of the separate self, and they will come to grasp the circle of perfection. Let them quiet, in the deep silence of their own being, the shifting, restless colors of their thoughts and desires, and they will become illuminated by what Alan calls the white light of divine knowledge. He gives us a beautiful musical image here. In a perfect chord, the single note, though it is no longer heard on its own, is still essential to the whole. It could not be a chord without it, and a drop of water becomes supremely useful the moment it lets go of its separateness and merges into the ocean. Sink yourself, Alan says with compassion, into the very heart of humanity, and you will find yourself reproducing the harmonies of heaven. Lose yourself in unlimited love toward everyone, and you will do work that truly lasts, becoming, in a sense, one with the eternal ocean of bliss. Humanity, Alan observes, tends to evolve outward, spreading itself thinner and thinner across an ever-expanding periphery of complexity, before eventually turning back inward toward the central simplicity it started from. When a person finally realizes it is simply not possible, mathematically speaking, to understand the universe before first understanding themselves, they begin walking the path that leads to that original simplicity. They start unfolding from within. And as they unfold themselves, layer by layer, they simultaneously come to enfold the whole universe within their understanding. Stop speculating about God, Alan advises, and instead find the all-embracing good that already lives within you. Do that, and you will see the emptiness of all that speculation, because you will already know yourself to be one with God. He makes a sharp observation about stubbornness here. Whoever refuses to release their secret lust, their greed, their anger, their fixed opinions about this or that person, Alan says, cannot truly see or know anything. They will remain a dull student in the school of wisdom, no matter how impressively educated they might appear to others. If a person wants to find the key to real knowledge, Alan says, let them find themselves. And here comes a striking piece of reframing. Your sins, he says, are not actually you. They are not even a part of who you truly are. They are more like diseases that you have simply grown attached to loving. Stop clinging to them, and they will stop clinging to you. Let them fall away, and your true self will finally stand revealed. You will then know yourself as comprehensive vision, as invincible principle, as immortal life, as eternal good. The impure person believes impurity is simply their natural, rightful condition. But the pure person knows themselves as pure being itself. And seeing past the surface veils, they recognize that same pure being in everyone else too. Purity, Alan says, is extremely simple and needs no elaborate argument to defend it. Impurity, on the other hand, is endlessly complicated and is constantly tangled up in defensive justifications. Truth simply lives itself out. A blameless life is the only real witness truth ever needs. People cannot see this and will not accept the witness of it until they discover inside themselves. And once they find it, Alan notes, they tend to grow quiet in the presence of others because truth is far too simple to survive inside arguments and self-promotion. It is so silent, in fact, that it only ever shows itself through action. Original simplicity, Alan says, is so profoundly simple that a person has to let go of everything they are holding on to before they can even perceive it. He compares this to a great stone arch, which draws its strength precisely from the hollow, empty space underneath it. In the same way, a wise person becomes strong and unshakable by emptying themselves out. The qualities that define original simplicity, Alan tells us, are meekness, patience, love, compassion, and wisdom. And because these qualities are so pure, imperfect people naturally struggle to understand them. Only wisdom, Alan notes, can truly recognize wisdom, which is exactly why the fool insists that no one is wise. The imperfect person says no one can possibly be perfect, and by believing that, they conveniently excuse themselves from ever trying. Even if that person lived their entire life alongside someone who genuinely was perfect, they still would not recognize that perfection. They would mistake meekness for cowardice. They would see love, patience, and compassion as weakness. And wisdom itself would look to their eyes like foolishness. True discrimination, Alan says, belongs only to whole and perfect picture, never to any single fragmentary part of it. That is exactly why we are urged to withhold judgment until we ourselves have actually lived out the perfect life we claim to be evaluating in others. When a person finally arrives at original simplicity, all the opacity clouding their vision disappears, and a kind of universal transparency becomes visible to them. Whoever has found the indwelling reality living inside their own being has, in that very moment, found the original and universal reality that underlies everything. Knowing the divine heart within themselves, they come to know all hearts, and the thoughts of every person become somehow accessible to the one who has truly mastered their own thoughts. This is exactly why, Alan says, a genuinely good person does not need to defend themselves. Instead, quietly and without force, they shape the minds of others simply by their presence, drawing others toward their own likeness. The chapter closes with a beautiful and bold idea. All problems, Alan says, dissolve completely once a person reaches pure goodness. That is why the truly good person has sometimes been called the slayer of illusions. What problem, after all, could possibly trouble someone in whom sin no longer exists? To anyone striving loudly and finding no rest, Alan offers this invitation. Retreat into the holy silence of your own being and live from there. In doing so, you'll find pure goodness, and you will tear straight through the veil of illusion that has kept you separated from the peace, the patience, and the transcendent glory of the perfect. Because Alan tells us plainly, pure goodness and original simplicity are, in the end, one and the same thing. Chapter 4, The Unfailing Wisdom. Alan begins this chapter with a challenge that is easy to agree with intellectually, but surprisingly hard to actually live out. He says a person should be greater than their possessions, greater than their own body, greater than their circumstances and surroundings, and greater than the opinions other people hold about them or their attitudes toward them. Until someone reaches that level, Alan argues, they cannot really be called strong or steady. And there is another layer to it too. A person also needs to rise above their own personal desires and their own fixed opinions. Until they manage that, Alan says plainly, they are not yet wise. Think about someone who has built their entire sense of identity around what they own. The moment those possessions are lost, that person feels as though everything has been lost. Think about someone who sees themselves as merely a product of their circumstances, endlessly shaped by whatever life throws at them. That person will weakly wobble with every shift in their outward conditions. And think about someone who builds their sense of worth entirely on other people's approval. Great unrest and pain will inevitably follow them, because approval is a moving target that can never truly be pinned down. The real solution, Alan says, is to detach yourself from every outward thing and instead rest securely on the inward virtue you have built within your own character. This, he calls the unfailing wisdom. A person who possesses this wisdom will remain exactly the same whether they find themselves in wealth or in poverty. Riches cannot add to their strength, and poverty cannot rob them of their calm. Wealth cannot corrupt someone who has already washed away every trace of inner corruption. And the lack of wealth cannot degrade someone who has stopped degrading the deeper temple of their own soul. To refuse being enslaved by any outward thing or event, Alan says, and instead to treat every circumstance as material for your own growth and education. This is what wisdom actually looks like in practice. To the wise, every occurrence becomes good because they have trained themselves to stop looking for evil in things. And by doing this, they grow wiser with each passing day. They put every single experience to good use, which means, in effect, that they place all things beneath their feet rather than being crushed beneath them. They notice their own mistakes the instant those mistakes happen, and they accept them as genuinely valuable lessons because they understand there are no true mistakes inside the larger divine order of things. In this way, they rapidly approach a kind of divine perfection. Nothing outside of them can move them, and yet they manage to learn from everything and everyone around them. They ask for love from no one, and yet they freely give love to everyone. To learn without being shaken, and to love where you are not loved in return. Here, Alan says, lies a strength that will never once fail a person. He gives a warning, too, about a certain kind of pride. The person who says in their heart, I will teach everyone and learn from no one, will end up neither teaching nor learning, so long as that attitude remains, and will simply stay trapped in their own foolishness. Alan makes a strong claim that all strength, all wisdom, all power, and all knowledge exists inside each of us. But he is careful to add, they will never be found through ego. They are only ever found through obedience, through submission, and through a genuine willingness to keep learning. A person must obey what is higher inside them, rather than glorifying whatever is lower. Whoever stands on their own ego, rejecting correction, rejecting instruction, rejecting the lessons that experience keeps trying to teach them, will surely fall. In fact, Alan says that person has already fallen, whether they realize it yet or not. He quotes what he describes as a great teacher speaking to students, telling them that those who become a lamp unto themselves, relying only on themselves rather than on outside help, holding fast instead to truth as their own guiding light, seeking their salvation in that truth alone, without leaning on anyone else. Those students, the teacher says, will reach the very highest place. But the teacher adds, they must be genuinely willing to learn. The wise person, Alan tells us, is always eager to learn, but never in a hurry to teach, because they already know that the true teacher lives inside the heart of every single person and must ultimately be discovered there by each of us in our own time. The foolish person, driven largely by vanity, is desperate to teach but unwilling to learn, because they have never actually found that holy inner teacher who speaks wisdom only to a humbly listening soul. Be self-reliant, Alan says, but let your self-reliance be a sacred thing, never a selfish one. Folly and wisdom, weakness and strength, all exist within a person, Alan insists, and never in anything external, nor do they spring from any outside cause. No one can be strong on behalf of someone else. They can only be strong for themselves. No one can overcome a struggle for another person. They can only overcome it within themselves. You may certainly learn something from another person, but you must personally accomplish the inner work for yourself. Put away every external prop you have been leaning on and rely instead on the truth already living inside you. A creed, Alan warns, will not hold a person steady in a moment of real temptation. What is actually needed is the inward knowledge capable of defeating that temptation. In the same way, a clever philosophy will prove to be nothing but a flimsy shadow in a time of real calamity. What a person truly needs then is inward wisdom, capable of putting an end to grief itself. Goodness, which every religion is ultimately reaching for, Alan says, is actually distinct from the religions themselves. Wisdom, which every philosophy is ultimately reaching for, is likewise distinct from all the philosophies built around it. The unfailing wisdom, he tells us, is found only through the steady, constant practice of pure thinking and good action, by tuning one's mind and heart toward everything that is beautiful, lovable, and true. Whatever condition a person currently finds themselves in, Alan says, they can always find what is true within it, and they can only find it by using their present circumstances, whatever they may be, as raw material for becoming stronger and wiser. Any weak longing for rewards, any cowardly fear of punishment should be set aside for good. Instead, Alan urges each of us to joyfully commit ourselves to faithfully carrying out our duties, forgetting our own petty pleasures, and living in a way that is strong, pure, and self-contained. That, he says, is how a person surely finds the unfailing wisdom, along with a strength and patience that feels almost godlike. He borrows a beautiful old passage here, reminding us that every situation we find ourselves in, no matter how ordinary, already contains its own duty and its own ideal buried inside it. The ideal, he says, is inside you, right where you stand. Your very condition, Whatever shape it takes is simply the raw material you are meant to shape that ideal out of, and it hardly matters whether the material feels rough or refined, so long as the form you eventually give it turns out heroic, turns out poetic, to anyone aching inside the walls of their own present circumstances. Cry out for some far-off kingdom where they might finally rule and create something meaningful. Alan offers us truth. What you are searching for is already inside you here and now, if only you had the eyes to see it. He quotes what he describes as a great teacher speaking to students, telling them that those who become a lamp unto themselves, relying only on themselves rather than on outside help, holding fast instead to truth as their own guiding light, seeking their salvation in that truth alone, without leaning on anyone else. Those students, the teacher says, will reach the very highest place. But the teacher adds, they must be genuinely willing to learn. The wise person, Alan tells us, is always eager to learn, but never in a hurry to teach, because they already know that the true teacher lives inside the heart of every single person and must ultimately be discovered there by each of us in our own time. The foolish person, driven largely by vanity, is desperate to teach but unwilling to learn, because they have never actually found that holy inner teacher who speaks wisdom only to a humbly listening soul. Be self-reliant, Alan says, but let your self-reliance be a sacred thing, never a selfish one. Folly and wisdom, weakness and strength, all exist within a person, Alan insists, and never in anything external, nor do they spring from any outside cause. No one can be strong on behalf of someone else. They can only be strong for themselves. No one can overcome a struggle for another person. They can only overcome it within themselves. You may certainly learn something from another person, but you must personally accomplish the inner work for yourself. Put away every external prop you have been leaning on and rely instead on the truth already living inside you. A creed, Alan warns, will not hold a person steady in a moment of real temptation. What is actually needed is the inward knowledge capable of defeating that temptation. In the same way, a clever philosophy will prove to be nothing but a flimsy shadow in a time of real calamity. What a person truly needs then is inward wisdom, capable of putting an end to grief itself. Goodness, which every religion is ultimately reaching for, Alan says, is actually distinct from the religions themselves. Wisdom, which every philosophy is ultimately reaching for, is likewise distinct from all the philosophies built around it. The unfailing wisdom, he tells us, is found only through the steady, constant practice of pure thinking and good action, by tuning one's mind and heart toward everything that is beautiful, lovable, and true. Whatever condition a person currently finds themselves in, Alan says, they can always find what is true within it, and they can only find it by using their present circumstances, whatever they may be, as raw material for becoming stronger and wiser. Any weak longing for rewards, any cowardly fear of punishment should be set aside for good. Instead, Alan urges each of us to joyfully commit ourselves to faithfully carrying out our duties, forgetting our own petty pleasures, and living in a way that is strong, pure, and self-contained. That, he says, is how a person surely finds the unfailing wisdom, along with a strength and patience that feels almost godlike. He borrows a beautiful old passage here, reminding us that every situation we find ourselves in, no matter how ordinary, already contains its own duty and its own ideal buried inside it. The ideal, he says, is inside you, right where you stand. Your very condition, whatever shape it takes, is simply the raw material you are meant to shape that ideal out of, And it hardly matters whether the material feels rough or refined, so long as the form you eventually give it turns out heroic, turns out poetic, to anyone aching inside the walls of their own present circumstances. Cry out for some far-off kingdom where they might finally rule and create something meaningful. Alan offers his truth. What you are searching for is already inside you, here and now, if only you had the eyes to see it. Chapter 5, The Might of Meekness. This chapter opens with one of Alan's most vivid images. He describes a mountain. A mountain does not bend beneath even the fiercest storm, and yet, at the very same time, it shelters a young bird and the newborn lamb. And even though countless feet tread across it, the mountain still holds them all up, bearing them upon its unshaken ancient body. In the very same way, Alan says the meek person, though nothing can shake or disturb them, still bends with compassion to shield the most vulnerable creature they encounter. And even while they may be looked down upon by others, they quietly lift everyone up and protect them with genuine love. Just as glorious as that mountain in its silent strength, Alan writes, is the truly spiritual person in their silent meekness. Like the shape of the mountain, this person's compassion is vast and expansive. Their physical body, like the base of the mountain, remains rooted down in the valleys in the midst of ordinary life. But the summit of their being lives eternally bathed in a cloudless glory, dwelling among the deep silences. Whoever has found true meekness, Alan says, has found divinity itself. They have touched divine consciousness, and they know themselves to be divine, and they see the same divinity in everyone else too, even though those others may not yet recognize in themselves. Still half asleep, still lost in their own dreaming. Meekness, Alan insists, is a genuinely divine quality, and because of that, it carries enormous power. The meek person overcomes not by resisting, but precisely by not resisting, and by allowing themselves to appear defeated, they actually achieve the highest kind of victory there is. Here Alan draws a fascinating distinction. The person who conquers someone else through force is merely strong, but the person who conquers themselves through meekness is mighty. And here's the twist. Whoever conquers another through force will themselves eventually be conquered in turn. But whoever conquers themselves through meekness can never be overthrown, because the merely human simply cannot overcome the divine. The meek person, Alan says, is triumphant even in apparent defeat. He points to historical examples to prove this. Socrates, he says, actually lives on more powerfully because he was put to death. In the crucified figure of Jesus, the risen Christ is revealed all the more clearly. And Stephen, even while being stoned, defies the very stones trying to harm him. Whatever is truly real, Alan argues, simply cannot be destroyed. Only what is unreal can be destroyed. And when a person finally discovers within themselves something real, something constant, something changeless and eternal, they step into that reality, and in doing so, they become meek. All the darker forces of the world may rise up against that person, but those forces cannot actually harm them, and eventually those forces simply give up and depart. The meek person is most clearly seen, Alan says, in times of real trial, when everyone else stumbles and falls. The meek person still stands. Their patience is never destroyed by the reckless passions of others. And when others come at them with hostility, they do not strive against it, and they do not cry out in protest. They know from deep experience the total powerlessness of evil because they have already overcome it within themselves, and they live steadily inside the unchanging strength of what is genuinely good. Meekness, he tells us, is really just one expression of that changeless love that lives at the very heart of everything, which is exactly why it is an imperishable quality. Whoever lives inside it becomes fearless, because they already know the highest, and they have placed everything lesser beneath their feet. The meek person shines brightest in darkness, Allen says, and actually flourishes in obscurity. Meekness cannot boast about itself. It cannot advertise itself. It cannot thrive on popularity. It is simply practiced, whether anyone notices it or not, because it is a spiritual quality that can only really be perceived through spiritual eyes. Those who have not yet spiritually awakened do not see it, and they do not love it, because they remain dazzled and blinded by worldly appearances and shallow shows. History itself, Allen notes, tends not to take much notice of a meek person, because history usually records strife and self-glorification, while the meek person's true glory belongs entirely to peace and gentleness. History records the earthly acts, not the heavenly ones. And yet, even living quietly in obscurity, the meek person cannot truly be hidden. How, after all, can light ever really be hidden? Such a person continues to shine even after withdrawing from the noise of the world, and is eventually honored by the very world that once failed to recognize him at all. If the meek person is neglected, mistreated, or misunderstood, Allen says, they count that as something of no real significance, and so it does not need to be dwelt on, let alone resisted. They know that such attacks are the flimsiest, most powerless shadows imaginable. And so, to those who offer them evil, they respond with good. They resist no one, and by resisting no one, they end up conquering everyone. Allen then addresses something many of us struggle with directly, the instinct to defend ourselves when we feel wronged. He says, whoever imagines they can be genuinely injured by others, and who then rushes to justify and defend themselves against those others, simply does not understand meekness. They do not yet grasp the true essence and meaning of life. He quotes an old teaching. He abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me, and warns that in anyone who keeps clinging to thoughts like these, hatred will never come to an end, because hatred is never actually put out by more hatred. Hatred, Allen insists, only ever ends through love. He asks, so what if your neighbor has spoken falsely about you? What of it really? Can a falsehood actually harm you? What is false remains simply false. And that is the end of the matter. It has no life of its own, and no real power to hurt anyone, except the person who is actually trying to use it as a weapon. It costs you nothing, Allen says, that your neighbor speaks falsely about you. What costs you something is if you resist them, if you fight to justify yourself, because in doing that, you actually give life and energy to your neighbor's falsehood. And it is that very act of resistance that ends up wounding and distressing you. Root out every trace of evil from your own heart, Allen says, and you will immediately see the foolishness of fighting against evil in someone else. He goes even further. Do you fear being trodden on by others? You are already, in a sense, being trodden on. Allen argues, the moment you allow yourself to think this way, the injury you believe is coming from another person is actually coming entirely from within yourself. The wrong thought, the wrong word, the wrong action of another person has no real power to hurt you unless you breathe life into it through your own passionate resistance, thereby inviting it into yourself. If someone slanders me, Allen says, that is a concern, not mine. My business is with my own soul, not with my neighbor's. Even if the whole world misjudges me, that is none of my concern. My only real business is to keep possession of my own soul in purity and love. There will never be an end to strife, Alan argues, until people stop trying to justify themselves. Whoever truly wants wars to end should stop defending any faction, should stop defending even themselves. Peace does not come through fighting harder. It comes only by ceasing from the fight altogether. He even offers a political image here, saying that the glory of any tyrant depends entirely on the resistance of his enemies. They resist him, and in resisting, they fall. But give a tyrant exactly what he demands. Withhold your resistance completely, and suddenly his glory and his power simply evaporate. This is how, through what looks like submission, the meek person actually conquers the strong one. But Alan is careful to clarify, this is not the outward show of submission that amounts to slavery. It is the inward spiritual submission that is, in truth, real freedom, claiming no rights of themselves. The meek person is never troubled by the need to defend or justify themselves. They live inside love, and by living there, they come under the immediate and vital protection of that great love which is, Alan tells us, the eternal law governing the entire universe. They neither claim anything for themselves nor chase after anything for themselves. And precisely because of this, everything comes to them, and the whole universe shields and protects them. Chapter 6, The Righteous Man. This chapter is short, but it lands with real force. Alan opens by declaring that the righteous person is genuinely invincible. No enemy, he insists, can ever truly overcome or confuse someone who lives this way. And such a person needs no protection beyond their own integrity and holiness. Just as it is impossible for evil to actually overcome good, Alan says, the righteous person can never truly be brought low by the unrighteous. Slander cannot reach them. Envy cannot reach them. Hatred and malice cannot cause them any real suffering. And anyone who tries to harm them ultimately only succeeds in bringing shame down upon themselves instead. The righteous person, Alan writes, has nothing to hide. They commit no acts that require secrecy, and they carry no thoughts or desires that they will be ashamed for others to discover. Because of this, they are fearless and they are unashamed. Their step is firm, their posture is upright, and their speech is direct, without any ambiguity or evasion. They can look anyone in the eye. How? Alan asks, could such a person possibly fear anyone when they have wronged no one? How could they feel ashamed before anyone when they have deceived no one? Having stopped doing wrong, they can no longer be wronged in any way that truly touches them. Having stopped deceiving, they can no longer be deceived. Performing every duty with careful diligence and living above the pull of sin, the righteous person, Alan tells us, becomes invulnerable at every single point. Whoever has already conquered the inward enemies of virtue can never really be brought down by any outward enemy, nor do they even need to seek protection against those enemies, because righteousness itself, Alan says, is already a complete and sufficient protection on its own. The unrighteous person, by contrast, is vulnerable at almost every turn, living inside their own passions, enslaved by prejudice, impulse, and half-formed opinions. They constantly imagine themselves suffering at the hands of others. The slander, the attacks, the accusations aimed at them cause real pain precisely because there is some grain of truth to them, some basis inside the person's own character. And because they lack the protection that righteousness offers, they end up trying to justify and protect themselves through retaliation, through clever arguments, and sometimes even through outright deceit. Alan even points out that a partially righteous person remains vulnerable at exactly those points where they fall short of full righteousness. And should even a righteous person slip, giving in to just one sin, their sense of invincibility disappears in that instant, because they have placed themselves exactly where an accusation can justly reach and wound them, because they have, in truth, already wounded themselves first. If a person suffers or is harmed because of something someone else has done, Allen advises them to look inward, setting aside self-pity and self-defense, because there in their own heart they will find the true source of their suffering. No real evil, Allen concludes, can happen to the righteous person who has already cut off the source of evil within themselves, living inside what he calls the all-good, and abstaining from sin in thought, in word, and in deed. Whatever happens to such a person becomes, in some deep sense, good. No person, no event, no circumstance can truly cause him suffering, because the tyranny that circumstance normally holds over us is utterly broken for anyone who is broken free from the bonds of sin. He ends a chapter with an open invitation to anyone who is suffering, sorrowing, weary, or brokenhearted. All of them, he says, are searching for a refuge free of sorrow, a harbor of perpetual peace. Let such people, Allen urges, fly toward the refuge of a righteous life. Let them come now and enter that haven of the sinless state, because sorrow cannot overtake the righteous. Suffering cannot reach the person who no longer wastes their spiritual substance chasing after selfish things, and no one can be afflicted by weariness or unrest whose heart has genuinely made peace with everyone and everything. Chapter 7, Perfect Love. Now we arrive at what may be the emotional heart of this entire book. Allen begins by describing what he calls the children of light, those who dwell inside the kingdom of heaven, and who see the entire universe, along with everything it contains, as the expression of a single law, the law of love. To them, love is not merely a nice rule to follow. Love is the actual law of life. Love, in fact, is life itself. Understanding this, they arrange their whole existence in harmony with love, without clinging to their own small personality. And by practicing this kind of obedience to what is highest, to divine love itself, they become, Allen says, conscious sharers in the power of love, and they arrive through this at perfect freedom, becoming, in his words, true masters of destiny. The universe, Allen writes, is held together and preserved because love lives at its very heart. Love is the only power capable of truly preserving anything. While hatred still lives inside a person's heart, that person imagines the law governing existence to be cruel. But once that heart is softened by compassion and love, they come to see instead that the law is actually infinite kindness. The law is so kind, in fact, that it even protects people against the consequences of their own ignorance. When a person, in their small efforts to work against that law, gives too much importance to their own tiny personality, they eventually bring so much suffering upon themselves that they're finally forced, in the depths of their affliction, to go searching for wisdom. And in finding wisdom, they find love and come to know it as the true law of their own being and the law of the entire universe. Love does not punish anyone, Allen insists. A person punishes themselves through their own hatred, through their stubborn efforts to preserve an evil that has no true life of its own, and through their attempts to work against a love that can neither be overcome nor destroyed, because it is made of the very substance of life itself. When someone burns themselves, does he ask, do they blame the fire? In the same way, whenever a person suffers, Allen suggests they look for some ignorance or disobedience hiding inside themselves. Love, Allen tells us, is perfect harmony, pure bliss, and because of that, It contains no element of suffering at all. Let a person think no thought and take no action that falls outside of pure love, and suffering will simply stop troubling them. If someone truly wants to know love and to taste its undying bliss, Alan says, they must practice it inside their own heart. They must, in a real sense, become love itself. Whoever consistently acts from the spirit of love, Alan says, is never abandoned and is never left stranded in a genuine dilemma, because impersonal love is, at the same time, both knowledge and power. Whoever has truly learned how to love has, by that same act, learned how to master every difficulty they will ever face, how to transform every failure into eventual success, how to clothe every event and every condition in garments of blessing and beauty. The path to love, Alan tells us, runs through self-mastery. And as a person travels that path, they build themselves up in knowledge along the way, arriving at love. They take full possession of their own body and mind by right of the divine power they have honestly earned through the journey. He quotes the famous line, "Perfect love casts out fear." To truly know love is to know that there is no genuinely harmful power anywhere in the entire universe. Even sin itself, which the worldly and the unbelieving imagine to be so unconquerable, is revealed, once you know love, to be a very weak, very perishable thing. One that shrinks away and disappears the moment it meets the compelling power of goodness. Perfect love, Alan says, is perfect harmlessness. And whoever has destroyed every thought of harm inside themselves, along with every desire to cause harm, receives, in return, universal protection, and comes to know themselves as genuinely invincible. Perfect love, he continues, is also perfect patience. Anger and irritability simply cannot live alongside it, and cannot even come near it. It sweetens every bitter occasion with a kind of holy perfume, and transforms trial itself into divine strength. Complaint, Alan says, is foreign to it. Whoever truly loves does not bewail their circumstances, but instead accepts everything, every condition, as though it were a heavenly guest. Because of this, they remain constantly blessed, and sorrow never quite manages to catch up with them. Perfect love, Alan adds, is perfect trust. Whoever has released the impulse to grasp and cling can never again be troubled by the fear of loss, because loss and gain both become equally foreign concepts to them. By steadily maintaining a loving attitude toward everyone, and pursuing their daily duties with a constant and loving energy, that person finds himself protected by love itself, which continues evermore to supply them fully with everything they truly need. Perfect love, he says, is also perfect power. A wisely loving heart commands respect without ever having to exercise force or authority. Everyone and everything ends up obeying the person who obeys what is highest inside themselves. They think, Alan writes, and their thought is already accomplished. They speak, and an entire world seems to hang on their simple words. They have harmonized their own thoughts with the imperishable, unconquerable forces of the universe. And for them, weakness and uncertainty simply cease to exist. Every one of their thoughts becomes a purpose. Every one of their actions becomes an accomplishment. They move together with a great law, rather than stubbornly setting their own small personal will against it. And in doing so, they become a channel through which divine power can flow unimpeded into beautiful and beneficial expression. They have, in a real sense, become power itself. Perfect love, Alan says, is finally perfect wisdom too. The person who loves everyone is a person who, in a deep sense, knows everyone, Having thoroughly learned the lessons hidden inside their own heart, they come understand the tasks and trials living inside every other heart too, and they gently adapt themselves to those other hearts without any pretense or showy display. Love illuminates the intellect, Allen writes, because without love, the intellect remains blind, cold, and lifeless. Love succeeds precisely where intellect fails. It sees where intellect is blind. It knows where intellect remains ignorant. Reason, he says, is only truly completed once it is joined with love and is ultimately absorbed into it entirely. Love is the supreme reality of the universe. And because of that, it contains every truth within it. An infinite tenderness enfolds and cherishes a whole universe, which is exactly why the truly wise person is gentle, childlike, and tender-hearted. They see that the one thing every living creature genuinely needs is love, and they give it freely without holding back. They know that every situation calls for the gentle, adjusting power of love, and so they stop responding to the world with harshness. Through the eyes of love, Allen says, everything is revealed not as an endless tangle of complicated effects, but in the clear light of eternal principles, out of which every cause and every effect first springs, and back into which they eventually return. God is love, Allen reminds us, and because that is true, nothing could ever be more perfect than love itself. Whoever wants to find pure knowledge, he says, should first go and find pure love. Finally, perfect love, Allen writes, is perfect peace. Whoever dwells within it has completed their long pilgrimage through the underworld of sorrow. With a calm mind and a heart finally at rest, they have banished the shadows of grief, and they now know what it truly means to live a deathless life. If you wish to perfect yourself in knowledge, Allen tells us at the end of this chapter, then perfect yourself in love. If you wish to reach the very highest place available to you, never stop cultivating a loving, compassionate heart. Chapter 8, Perfect Freedom. Allen begins this chapter with a bold statement. There is no bondage in a heavenly life. There is only perfect freedom. This, he says, is its great glory. And this supreme freedom is gained through one thing only, obedience. Whoever obeys the highest, he explains, cooperates with the highest, and by doing so, masters every force living inside them and every condition surrounding them from the outside. A person may certainly choose the lower path and ignore the higher one, but the higher, Allen insists, is never truly overcome by the lower. This, he says, is exactly where the real meaning of freedom is revealed. Let a person choose a higher path, abandoning the lower one, and they will establish themselves as someone who overcomes, and they will discover what perfect freedom really feels like. To simply hand the reins over to whatever impulse strikes you, Allen writes, is the only true slavery. To conquer yourself is the only true freedom. The person enslaved to their own self loves their chains and refuses to let even one of them be broken out of fear that they might lose some cherished little pleasure. They cling to their gratifications and their vanities, treating freedom from those things as though it were some empty, undesirable condition. In doing this, Allen says, they end up defeating and enslaving themselves. Perfect freedom, he insists, is found only through self-enlightenment. As long as a person remains ignorant of themselves, of their own desires, their own emotions and thoughts, and of the inward causes shaping their life and destiny, having neither control nor understanding of who they truly are, they will remain trapped in bondage to passion, sorrow, suffering, and unpredictable fortune. The land of perfect freedom, Allen tells us, can only be reached through the gate of knowledge. All outward oppression, Allen argues, is really nothing more than a shadow and effect of a deeper, real oppression happening within for ages. Oppressed people have cried out for liberty, and yet thousands of laws crafted by human hands have failed to actually give it to them. Real liberty, Allen says, can only be given by people to themselves. They will find it only through obedience to the divine statutes already written on their own hearts. Let people turn instead toward that inward freedom, and the shadow of outward oppression will no longer be able to darken the earth. Let people stop oppressing themselves, Allen says, and no one will be able to oppress their neighbor either. He observes, almost sadly, that people spend enormous energy legislating for outward freedom, while simultaneously making that very freedom impossible to achieve, because they keep nurturing an inward condition of enslavement inside themselves. In this way, they chase a shadow on the outside while completely ignoring the substance living within. A person, Allen says, will only be truly free once they are free from the small self. Every outward form of bondage and oppression will end only once people stop willingly enslaving themselves to passion, error, and ignorance. Freedom, he says, simply belongs to free as long as people cling to weakness. Allen writes, they cannot possess strength. As long as they love darkness, they cannot receive light. And as long as they prefer bondage, they cannot enjoy liberty. Strength, light, and freedom, he insists, are all available right now and can be claimed by anyone who genuinely loves them and aspires toward them. Freedom, Allen adds, does not come from cooperative aggression, because aggression always produces, in reaction, a cooperative defense, warfare, hatred, factional strife, and the destruction of the very liberty being fought for. Freedom, instead, lives inside individual self-conquest. The liberation of all humanity, Allen says, is held back and frustrated by the self-enslavement of each individual person. To anyone cry out to other people or to God, demanding liberty, Allen offers this challenge. Liberate yourself first. The true heavenly freedom, he says, is freedom from passion, freedom from craving, freedom from fixed opinions, freedom from the tyranny both of the flesh and of the intellect. This inward freedom comes first, and every outward freedom naturally follows as its effect. This freedom, beginning within and gradually extending outward until it embraces a whole person, becomes an emancipation so complete, so all-embracing, so perfect, that it leaves no chain unbroken anywhere. Free your soul from every sin, Allen says, and you will walk as a freed and fearless person through a world still full of fearful slaves. And seeing you walk that way, many of those slaves will take heart and will join you on a road toward that same glorious freedom. He offers a warning, too, about a mistaken shortcut some people try to take. Whoever says, my worldly duties feel irksome to me, so I will abandon them and go off into solitude, where I will feel as free as the open air, and thinks they have found freedom that way, will actually find, Allen warns, only a harder slavery waiting for them. The tree of freedom, he says, is rooted in duty, and whoever wants to taste its sweet fruit has to discover real joy inside their duties, rather than escaping them. Whoever is truly freed from the small self, Allen writes, becomes glad-hearted, calm, and ready for any task set before them. Irksomeness and weariness simply cannot enter their heart, and their inner strength lightens every burden so effectively that its weight almost cannot even be felt. They do not run away from duty while dragging their chains along behind them. Instead, they break those chains entirely and stand free. Make yourself pure, Allen concludes. Make yourself proof against weakness, temptation, and sin, because it's only within your own heart and mind that you will ever find the perfect freedom that the entire world sighs for and searches after so often in vain. Chapter 9, Greatness and Goodness. Alan opens this chapter with a trinity of qualities he says can never truly be separated. Goodness, simplicity, and greatness, he writes, are actually one and the same thing. All greatness, he insists, springs from goodness, and all goodness is, at its core, profoundly simple. Without goodness, there is no such thing as real greatness. He points out that some people move through the world like destructive forces, like a tornado or an avalanche, but he is careful to note they are not actually great. They stand in relation to true greatness the way an avalanche stands in relation to the mountain it tumbles down from. The real work of greatness, Alan says, is enduring and preserving, never violent or destructive. The greatest souls, he tells us, are always the most gentle. Greatness, Alan observes, is never pushy or attention-seeking. It works quietly without seeking recognition, which is exactly why it is not easily noticed or appreciated in its own time. Like a mountain, it towers up in its own vastness, so much so that the people living right at its base, who receive its shelter and its shade every single day, often fail to actually see it. Its truly sublime grandeur only becomes visible once you step back and gain some distance from it. In the same way, the great person is rarely fully seen by the people who live alongside them. The true majesty of their character only comes into focus once time has passed, once distance has grown. This, Alan calls the awe and enchantment of distance. Most people, he notes, stay busy occupying themselves with small things, their houses, their trees, their little plots of land. Very few people ever really contemplate the mountain at whose base they happen to be living, and even fewer attempt to actually explore it. But once distance grows, all those small things fade from view, and only then does the solitary beauty of the mountain finally reveal itself. Popularity, loud attention-seeking, shallow displays. Alan says these superficial things fade quickly and leave nothing lasting behind them, while true greatness slowly rises up out of obscurity and endures forever. He gives us historical examples here. The religious leaders and crowds of his own time, Alan says, failed to see the divine beauty living inside Jesus. They saw nothing more than an uneducated carpenter. To the people who actually knew him personally, Homer was nothing more than a blind beggar, and yet the centuries that followed revealed him as the immortal poet we remember today. 200 years after the ordinary details of a certain farmer's life in Stratford had faded from memory, the real Shakespeare finally became visible to the world. All true genius, Alan tells us, is impersonal. It does not actually belong to the individual person through whom it happens to express itself. It belongs to everyone. It is a diffusion of pure truth, the light of heaven falling equally upon all humanity. Every genuine work of genius, Alan says, in whatever field of art it happens to appear, is a symbolic expression of that same impersonal truth. It is universal, and it finds an answering response in every heart, across every age and every culture. Anything less than that, he insists, simply is not genius, and is not true greatness. Work created to defend a particular religion eventually perishes. Alan notes, it is religion itself, the underlying truth, that actually lives on. Theories about immortality fade away over time, but the immortal human spirit endures. Commentaries written about truth eventually turn to dust, but truth itself remains. What is truly great in art, Alan says, is whatever manages to represent what is genuinely true. And what is truly great in life is whatever proves itself universally and eternally true. And he adds, the true and the good are, in the end, the very same thing. Every truly immortal work, Alan writes, springs from the eternal goodness living inside the human heart, and it is naturally clothed in the sweet, unaffected simplicity that goodness always carries with it. The greatest art, like nature itself, is artless. It contains no trick, no pose, no strained or studied effort. There are no cheap theatrical tricks in Shakespeare, Alan points out, and it is precisely because of that simplicity that he stands as the greatest of all dramatists. Critics, not understanding the wise simplicity behind true greatness, often end up condemning the very loftiest work, because they cannot tell the difference between what is merely childish and what is genuinely childlike, what is truly true, truly beautiful, and truly great. Alan insists always carries something childlike about it and remains perpetually fresh and young. The genuinely great person, Alan says, is always the good person and is always simple. They draw from and in fact actually live inside the inexhaustible fountain of divine goodness that flows within them. They inhabit heavenly places in a sense. They commune with the great figures who have already passed on. They live in close company with the invisible. They are inspired and they breathe, quite literally, the very air of heaven. Whoever wants to become great, Alan advises, should learn to become good instead. In doing that, they will actually become great, precisely because they were never chasing greatness directly in the first place. Aim straight at greatness, Alan warns, and you will end up arriving at nothing at all. Aim instead at what feels like nothing, and you will find yourself arriving at real greatness. The desire to be seen as great, he says, is actually a telltale sign of smallness, of personal vanity and self-promotion, a genuine willingness to disappear from view, a total absence of self-glorification. This, Alan insists, is the true mark of greatness. Smallness, he observes, always seeks and loves authority. Greatness, on the other hand, is never authoritative in that pushy sense. And precisely because of this, it eventually becomes a very authority that later generations look back to and appeal toward. Whoever seeks personal power, Alan says, loses in the end. Whoever is willing to lose, it wins the hearts of everyone. Simply be your simple self, he urges, your better self, your impersonal self. In that very act, you already become great. Whoever selfishly grasps at authority ends up becoming, at best, a trembling apologist, hiding behind the reputation of some already acknowledged greatness that belongs to someone else. But whoever willingly becomes a servant of everyone, seeking no personal authority for themselves, will live fully as a true human being and will, in the end, be called great. Alan quotes an old line here, urging us to abide in the simple and noble regions of our own life, to obey our own heart, and in doing so, to reproduce something of that ancient, foundational world all over again. Forget your own small self, he says, and fall back instead on the universal self, and you'll find yourself reproducing, in living and enduring forms, 1,000 beautiful experiences. You will discover, buried inside yourself, that simple goodness which is in truth greatness itself. He quotes the great essayist Emerson here too, who said it is just as easy to be great as it is to be small, and Alan agrees completely, calling this a genuinely profound truth. Forgetfulness of self, he says, is really the entirety of greatness, just as it is the entirety of goodness and genuine happiness. In one fleeting moment of forgetting yourself, the smallest soul suddenly becomes great. Now imagine extending that single moment indefinitely, and you have described a great soul, a truly great life. Cast off your own personality, Alan urges, your petty cravings, your vanities, your ambitions. Treat them like a worn-out, worthless garment, and instead dwell inside the loving, compassionate, selfless regions of your own soul. Do that, Alan promises, and you're no longer small. You are great. Claiming personal authority for yourself, Alan warns, causes a person to descend into smallness. Practicing goodness, on the other hand, causes a person to rise into greatness. The loud presumptuousness of small-minded people may, for a time, obscure the humble quietness of the truly great. But eventually, Alan insists, it gets swallowed up entirely by that greatness, the way a noisy river eventually loses itself inside the vast calm of the ocean. Both the vulgarity of ignorance and the pride of excessive learning, Alan says, need to disappear because they are equally worthless when measured against the soul of goodness. Neither one has any real part in it. If you want to truly do something meaningful, Alan tells us, you must first genuinely be something meaningful. Do not mistake mere information for real knowledge. You must come and know yourself as pure knowledge itself. Do not confuse mere learning with real wisdom. You must come to understand yourself as undefiled wisdom itself. He offers a beautiful series of challenges here to anyone who wants to create lasting work. Do you want to write a living book? You must first live. You must wrap yourself in the mystic garment of a rich and varied experience. And you must learn through enjoyment and through suffering, through gladness and through sorrow, through both conquest and defeat, the things that no book and no teacher could ever hand to you directly. You must learn about life, about your own soul. You must walk what Alan calls the lonely road, and through walking it, you must become someone new. You must simply be. Only then will you write your book, and only then will it actually live, becoming more than merely a book. Let your book live inside you first, Alan advises, and only then will you find yourself living inside your book. Do you want to carve a statue or paint a picture that will captivate people for generations to come? You must first become acquainted with the divine beauty already living inside you. You must comprehend and adore that invisible beauty. You must come to know the underlying principles that give form its soul. You must perceive the matchless symmetry and flawless proportion running through life, through being, through the entire universe. Only by knowing what is eternally true, Alan says, will you be able to carve or paint what is truly, indescribably beautiful. Do you want to write a poem that outlasts you? You must first live your poem. You must learn to think and act with a kind of rhythm running through you. You must find the never-failing source of inspiration, hidden in the loving places of your own heart. Then, Alan promises immortal lines will flow out of you effortlessly. And just as wildflowers spring up spontaneously in the woods and the open fields, beautiful thoughts will grow naturally inside your heart, and held gently inside carefully chosen words like a mold shaping their beauty. Those thoughts will move and subdue the hearts of everyone who reads them. Do you want to compose music capable of gladdening and lifting up the whole world? You must attune your soul to the heavenly harmonies. You must come and know that you yourself, that life itself, that the entire universe itself is music. You must learn to touch the very chords of life. You must come and know that music is truly everywhere, that it is the very heart of being, and then, Alan promises you will hear with your own spiritual ear the deathless symphonies playing all around you. Do you want to preach a living word to the world? You must give up your small self entirely and become that word yourself. You must know one single thing above all else, that the human heart is fundamentally good, is fundamentally divine. You must live one thing above all else: love. You must love everyone, seeing no evil in them, thinking no evil of them, believing no evil about them. Then Alan says, even if you speak only a few words, every one of your actions will carry real power, and every one of your words will become, in effect, a teaching through your own pure thought, through your own selfless action. Even if it remains hidden from view, you will end up preaching across the ages to countless souls still striving to reach upward, to anyone who chooses goodness above everything else, sacrificing all else for it. Alan tells us something greater is given in return, something that includes and surpasses everything they gave up. That person becomes a possessor of the very best life has to offer. They commune with what is highest. They enter the company of the truly great. Greatness that is flawless, round, and complete, Alan concludes, stand above and beyond all art itself. It is in its truest form, simply perfect goodness made visible in a human life, which is exactly why he says the greatest souls always become, in one way or another, teachers. Chapter 10, Heaven in the Heart. And now, we arrive at the final chapter, the one that gives the whole book its name and pulls together everything Alan has been building toward. He opens with a striking claim about the very nature of work and struggle, the toil of life. He says, ceases the moment the heart becomes pure, once the mind is brought into harmony with the divine law. The endless wheel of drudgery stops turning, and all work transforms into joyful activity instead. The pure-hearted, Alan says, are like the lilies of the field, which do not toil, and yet remain fed and clothed from the abundant storehouse of the all-good. But he is careful to point out that the lily is not actually lazy. It is ceaselessly active, quietly drawing nourishment from the earth, the air, and the sun through the divine power already living inside it. It builds itself up cell by cell, opening itself to the light, growing and expanding steadily toward its own perfect flowering. And so it is, Alan says, with anyone who has released their own stubborn self-will and has learned instead to cooperate with the divine will. They grow in grace, in goodness, and in beauty, free from anxiety, without friction, without needless toil. And Alan adds, they never work in vain. There is no wasted effort. Every thought, every action, every single thing they do ends up serving the larger divine purpose and adds to the total sum of the world's happiness. Heaven, Alan tells us plainly, is in the heart. Anyone who searches for it anywhere else will search in vain. Heaven cannot be found in any outward place until it is first found within the soul itself. Because wherever the soul travels, its own thoughts and desires travel right alongside it. However beautiful someone's outward home might be, if sin is living inside them, there will be darkness and gloom surrounding them regardless, because sin always casts its own dark shadow across the path of the soul, the long shadow of sorrow. This world, Alan insists, is beautiful, transcendently, wonderfully beautiful. Its beauties and its inspiring wonders cannot even be counted. And yet, to a mind poisoned by sin, the very same world can appear as nothing more than a dark and joyless place. Wherever passion and self dominate, Alan says, there is hell, complete with all of hell's suffering, wherever holiness and love dominate instead. There is heaven, complete with all of heaven's joy. Heaven, he insists, is right here. It is also at the same time everywhere. It exists wherever a pure heart happens to be beating. The entire universe, Alan tells us, overflows with joy, but a heart still bound by sin simply cannot see it, hear it, or share in it. No one, Alan says firmly, is ever arbitrarily shut out of heaven. Each person shuts themselves out entirely on their own. Its golden gates, he writes, stand eternally ajar, and yet the selfish person cannot manage to find them. They mourn, and yet fail to see. They cry out, and yet fail to hear. Only to those who turn their eyes toward heavenly things and their ears toward heavenly sounds are the joyful gates of the kingdom finally revealed. And once revealed, Alan says, they simply walk in and are glad. All of life becomes gladness. Alan writes, once the heart is set right, once it is tuned to the sweet chords of holy love. Life is religion, he says, and religion is life, and the whole of it is joy and gladness. The jarring, competing notes of creeds and factions, the black shadows of sin, let them pass away forever, Alan urges, because they can never enter the true door of life. They form no genuine part of real religion. Joy, music, beauty, these, Alan insists, belong to the true order of things. They are woven directly into the fabric of the universe. Out of these very things, the divine garment of life itself is woven. Pure religion, he says, is glad, never gloomy. It is light, entirely without darkness, entirely without shadow. Despondency, disappointment, grief, Alan calls these a reflex, the mirror image of pleasurable excitement, self-seeking, and desire. Give up the latter, he says, and the former will disappear forever, leaving behind only the perfect bliss of heaven, abounding, unmixed happiness. Alan writes, is a person's true life. Perfect blessedness is their rightful inheritance. And when a person finally loses their false constructed life and finds their true one instead, they step into full possession of their own kingdom. The kingdom of heaven, Alan tells us, is a person's true home, and it exists here, and it exists now inside their own heart, and they are never left without guidance, so long as they are willing to actually seek it. All of a person's sorrows and sufferings, Alan insists, are the direct result of their own self-chosen estrangement from the divine source, from the all-good, from what he calls the Father, the very heart of love. Let a person simply return home, Alan says, and their peace will already be waiting for them there. The heavenly-hearted, Alan writes, live without sorrow and without suffering, precisely because they live without sin. What worldly-minded people call troubles, they instead regard as pleasant tasks belonging to love and wisdom. Troubles, Alan insists, belong entirely to hell. They simply do not enter into heaven. This truth is so simple, he says, that it should not feel strange to hear it. If you are carrying a trouble, it exists only inside your own mind and nowhere else. You are the one making it. It was never handed to you from outside. It does not live inside your task itself. It does not live inside that outward circumstance itself. You are its creator, and it draws its entire life from you alone. Look upon every difficulty as a lesson still waiting to be learned, as an aid to your own spiritual growth, Alan urges, and suddenly those difficulties stop being difficulties at all. This, he tells us, is one of the true pathways up into heaven, to transform everything into happiness and joy. This, Alan says, is supremely the work and the duty of the heavenly-minded person. To reduce everything instead into wretchedness and deprivation is the process that the worldly-minded person unconsciously pursues day after day without even realizing it. To live in love, Alan writes, is to work in joy. Love, he says, is a magic that transforms all things into power and beauty. It brings plenty out of poverty, power out of weakness, loveliness out of what once seemed deformed, sweetness out of bitterness, light out of darkness, and produces every blissful condition imaginable out of its own rich, indescribable essence. Whoever truly loves, Alan tells us, can never truly want for anything. The universe, he says, belongs to goodness. And because of that, it belongs equally to the good person. It can be possessed by everyone fully, without any scarcity or hesitation, because goodness, and the abundance that goodness naturally carries with it, whether material, mental, or spiritual, is genuinely inexhaustible. Think lovingly, Alan urges. Speak lovingly, act lovingly, and in doing so, every single need you have will be met. You will not find yourself wandering through desert places, and no real danger will overtake you. Love, he says, sees with faultless vision. It judges with true judgment. It acts with real wisdom. Look at the world through the eyes of love, Alan promises, and you will begin to see the beautiful and the true absolutely everywhere. Judge with the mind of love, and you will make no real errors, and you will never have to mourn over some wrong turn. Act in the spirit of love, and you will strike undying harmonies across what Alan calls the harp of life. Make no compromise with your own small self. He urges one final time. Do not stop striving until your entire being has been swallowed up completely by love. To love everyone always, this, Alan tells us, is the very heaven of heavens. He quotes a beautiful line here, encouraging us to let there be nothing left inside us that is not truly beautiful and truly gentle, because then there will be nothing left outside us either that is not somehow softened and beautified by the quiet spell of our own presence. Whatever you do, Alan says, let flow from calm wisdom, never from raw desire, from restless impulse, or from stubborn opinion. This, he tells us, is a truly heavenly way of taking action in the world. Purify your inner world of thought, Alan writes, until not a single stain remains, and you'll find yourself ascending into heaven, even while still living inside your own physical body. You will begin to see the outward world clothed in every kind of beautiful form imaginable. Having discovered the divine beauty already living within yourself, you'll find that it springs to life again in every single thing you look at on the outside. To a soul that has been made beautiful within, Alan tells us, the whole world becomes beautiful in return. And in one of the final, tender images of the book, Alan compares undeveloped souls to unopened flowers. Perfect beauty, he says, lies quietly concealed inside every one of them, waiting for the day it will finally reveal itself fully, in the full, radiant light of heaven. Seeing people this way, Alan writes, we come to stand in a place where evil simply does not exist for us, and where our own eyes learn to behold only good. Here, he says, lies the true peace, patience, and beauty of love. It simply refuses to see evil, and whoever learns to love in this way becomes, in the end, a genuine protector of everyone around them, even if, in their own ignorance, others should come to hate them. That person continues to shield and to love them still. And there we have it. The full arc of James Allen's A Heavenly Life. From the divine center living quietly at the core of your own being, all the way to that final, radiant image of heaven blooming inside a purified heart. If there's one single thread running through every chapter of this book, it is this: the life you are searching for is not somewhere else. It is not waiting for you after death, or after some circumstance finally changes, or after some other person finally treats you the way you wish they would. Alan tells us again and again, in a dozen different ways, that the kingdom is already here, that the peace you crave is already inside you, buried perhaps under years of noise, but never actually gone, that the freedom you long for has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with whether you have conquered yourself, that the greatness you admire in others is simply goodness, quietly practiced, without ever needing an audience, and that love, patient, meek, undefeated love, is not a soft or sentimental idea, but the single most powerful and unshakable force in the entire universe. Alan is not asking you to wait for a better life. He is asking you to notice the one you already have the tools to build, right now, today, from the inside out. If these words move something in you the way they move me putting this together, do one more thing before you go. Subscribe so that when the next book like this one crosses my path, you will be here to walk through it with me. Until then, find your center, stay in the now, and remember, wherever you go, heaven was never a destination. It was always quietly, patiently, waiting in your own heart.